Well, I think we can get started. Thank you all for coming. My name's Karen Cunningham, and Vicki Gorham and I plan these programs, and we're just delighted to have the speaker today. She's come all the way from Port Orford. She's worked for the Oregon Kelp Alliance, and I've just been chatting with her, and so the past few days she's been diving. So this is an immersive science, and I'm sure she'll give a really good talk. But before we begin, let me just say that next month's topic is a photographic journey into South Africa. And that is the speaker we've had before, Vicki, and I think it's going to be really, really a good one. The month after that is the Galapagos Islands. And Dennis Triglia is the presenter. He presented on the monarch butterfly last year. And so he's a scientist. I think we're going to have a really good balance of photos and science and also the touring aspect of his trip. Is there anything else I need to announce today? Well, let's get started. This is Carolyn McKinnon. And Carolyn, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for showing up to talk about Oregon's kelp forests. It's a topic I'm very passionate about, which I'm sure will come across. So we're going to talk about the Oregon Kelp Alliance, which is the organization I work for. I started in August. I am the Urchin Control and Dive Safety Coordinator for Orka. And today we're going to be talking about taking care of kelp forests. So a little bit more about myself. I'm Carolyn, and I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia on the east coast of Canada. And after I got my degree, I moved to the west coast of Canada and worked in a bunch of environmental and marine science roles on Vancouver Island. I've worked in marine public education and environmental consulting, and 3 years ago I started working in kelp restoration, and that's where I still am. So I came down in August to Southern Oregon to work with Oregon's kelp forests. So I've gone from two species, the giant kelp and the bull kelp, to primarily the bull kelp here in Oregon, but we'll get into that in more detail. So today's talk, what we're going to go over, what is Orka, how did it come to be? Oregon's kelp forests, what are they, where are they, what's going on with them, why do we need a whole alliance about them? The Oregon Kelp Forest Stewardship Initiative, our long-term vision at Orka, some parting messages, and then there'll be some time for a Q&A at the end. That being said, if you have a burning question you can't sit on or you will forget by the end, feel free to put your hand up and I'll do my best.
Yeah, what is that right there? It looks like a whale with
Yeah.
What's the other stuff?
So, excellent question. Oh, the green didn't show up on the screen. Anyway, this is a gray whale, and this is all kelp. This is bull kelp, so this is a drone shot. A lot of Orka's mapping happens via drone. And so this is what kelp looks like from, I guess, a bird's eye view. So all of this brown stuff. You've got the blades here, the float. Have you all seen bull kelp washed up on the beach? You've got the blades and the float and then the big long stipe. Kelp are technically not plants, and so we have different words for all the different parts of kelp. So the things that look like leaves are called blades. The thing that looks like a stem is a stipe. The thing that looks like roots is not roots. It's called a holdfast, because all it does is like hold fast to the seafloor.
It looks like it's sticking up out of the water.
They're not actually sticking out of the water very far. The float will reach the surface and it'll start growing across the top.
Okay.
So most of these are lying flat on top of the surface. Pretty bad for your prop if you drive straight into it on a boat, but that's just how it grows. And gray whales like to feed in and around kelp forests. They don't actually eat the kelp itself, but it's good habitat for them to feed around and in. Okay, so how did Orka come to be? Does anybody know Tom Calvanese? I'm learning that a lot of people know this man. He's super involved in the community in Port Orford. He's the director of Orka, and he used to be the field station manager at the Port Orford field station. And he used to be an urchin diver as well, and so some of his urchin diving friends were coming to him in like 2019 and saying, Tom, something's going on with the kelp, as in it's going away. There's not very much of it anymore. And as a result of the declining in kelp, they were noticing there weren't as many marketable urchins. Rockfish fishermen were noticing fewer rockfish. And so he started looking around. And this is Nellie's Cove, and a lot of people actually along the whole west coast of North America were noticing some changes in their local ecosystem. So this is Nellie's in 2017. This is all bull kelp here, and this is the same cove. I think this is probably 2022 or so, and there is no kelp anymore. It's all gone. And so this obviously has implications, not just the kelp itself, but everything that uses the kelp, like that whale that we saw in that first image. Rockfish use kelp as habitat. They like to live in and around kelp. Abalone eat kelp. And then obviously people as well, like those fishermen who are noticing declines in their catches. So in response to this, the Oregon Kelp Alliance formed in 2020. And we're made up of people from pretty diverse backgrounds. Like I said, urchin divers, tribal members, researchers, managers, conservationists, tour guides, sport divers, chefs, other community members. We're a large group of people all working together who have a vested interest in seeing Oregon's kelp return to healthy forests. So that's Orca. Kind of makes sense? Great. The kelp forests now. We've been talking a lot about it. What are they? What do they look like? Where do you find them? So in Oregon, the kelp forests are primarily made of bull kelp. So that's that photo over there on the left. Generally, a kelp forest is just a kelp that has a float on it, which will raise the kelp up towards the surface. And in doing so, it brings the blades closer to the light for photosynthesis, but it also, in lifting the whole body of the kelp up, creates a vertical structure in the ocean. So you can kind of see here, you've got all these stipes in the water, and that creates habitat that fish can hide in, right? Without the kelp, you just have the surface of the water column, and seafloor. And so if you're a small fish and you have many fish predators, and you're just swimming in this blue water, anything can see you from any angle. It's very stressful. But if there's kelp there and you've got a bit of vertical structure, you can hide in and amongst it. Maybe you're not as visible. There's a better habitat for you to live in and grow up in. So that's essentially what a kelp forest is. In Oregon, almost all of the kelp forests are bull kelp, and they form the canopy. There's also understory kelps. So in this photo, this is torn kelp or split kelp. It doesn't have a float. It grows up a couple feet high. It has a stipe. The stipe is really stiff on those kelps. If you ever see them washed up, sometimes they're called walking stick kelp because they're really stiff. Yeah. I know people who will give them to their dogs as chew toys because they're so stiff and hard once they dry out. But those are some of the understory kelps. There's also prostrate kelps like sugar kelp and wide-ribbed kelp, broad-ribbed kelp that will just lay flat on the seafloor. The other thing I want to point out in this photo is the urchins. So urchins and kelp are a very big story right now. Has anyone heard about urchins and kelp already? No. Amazing, we'll get into it. So this is a lot of urchins for a healthy kelp forest, probably too many, but these are both red and purple urchins. They are native to Oregon. The problem is that there's too many of them, but they are a natural part of the kelp forest. We just need less of them. We don't need them gone, we just need fewer. Okay, so that's a kelp forest. You've got kelps in it. It creates habitat, which allows a diverse range of fish and animals to live in and use the forest. Kind of makes sense?
And we
Yes.
said it's not a plant,
Yes.
but it does photosynthesis.
Yes.
Okay, is it taking something from the bottom too, like minerals or whatever?
That's an excellent question. because kelps are surrounded by water, they actually don't need to absorb anything from the ground because they can just absorb whatever minerals or nutrients they need from the water, and they can do it with their whole bodies.
So is that what makes them not a plant? What are they? What are they?
Yeah, so that's kind of up for debate currently. When I did my kelp, like my seaweed class, they were technically protists, but they were the only most protists are like microscopic. And then the seaweeds were the only large multicellular protists, and that was confusing. So they're no longer protists, but I actually don't know what they are right now.
Fascinating.
Do they have chitin or?
Nope.
No.
Nope, they are, I actually don't know the exact structures of the proteins that give them stiffness or structure.
But it's not like a mushroom.
No,
Okay.
no. Kelps are a mystery. That's part of why we love them. Okay, so that's the forest. Where can you find them? In Oregon, generally they're in a pretty narrow band along the coast because kelps are photosynthetic. They like to stay in shallower water. So generally that is kind of like 18 feet to 45 feet. Some of the commercial fishermen Orka works with say they see them on their crab line 60 feet down, which is quite annoying for them. But that's quite deep for kelp. So historically in Oregon, there were some patches of forests up by Pacific City, Cape Lookout, Depot Bay, and Newport. And then there were extensive forests lining the whole south coast, basically from Cape Arago to Brookings. And I guess the other thing I should say is that kelps live pretty much exclusively on rocky ground. They can't live in sand. They can't attach. Right? It's not actually root system, it just like sticks onto whatever it's growing on. So if it's sand, like there's nothing for it to grab onto with sand, but with rock, it can kind of grab into some of those crevices on the rock. This was a video that I don't think is gonna play. Okay, so that was the historic kelp forest, but things have been changing in the ocean, and so things have been changing for the kelp. So to properly discuss these changes, we have to go back to the late 1800s and the sea otter. So sea otters were hunted they actually weren't driven extinct. They were extirpated from Oregon and most of the west coast of North America. I believe there were some populations left in Alaska and maybe California. But the otters were hunted to extirpation in Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And that had some impact on the kelp forest because otters eat a lot of urchins. They're very fuzzy. They have super dense fur. They don't have blubber, so their fur is how they stay warm, and it's pretty good at it, but they still have to eat 30% of their body weight a day. And so sea otters just eat a lot of kind of whatever they can catch. They really love crabs and mussels and clams, but they'll eat urchins as well. Also in the 1860s, settlers to the Oregon coast arrived, displacing the indigenous nations that had been living on this coast since time immemorial, and that obviously disrupted the traditional land management and shoreline management practices of those people. And then we're gonna jump forward a solid century and a half. So in the 2000s, the increasing impacts of global climate change were being noticed. Things like when spring happens, the timing of spring in the ocean shifts more often. It's harder to predict. This year, for instance, is about a month ahead of last year. The timing of the upwelling and how often it happens and when it happens is much more volatile. And the big one is for the kelp forest is marine heat waves. Kelp have a pretty specific temperature range that they'll live in. And also in 2014 to 2016, there was this massive marine heat wave. It was called the blob. Very creative. And one of the effects was the blob was that there was it triggered a sea star wasting disease event. Anyone heard of this or seen it? Yeah. So it was kind of gross to watch, because for a couple years you'd go to the beach and like pretty much any species of sea star you could see, they would have skin lesions on them, their arms would start dropping off, it would look like the star was like basically melting away. Pretty gross. It impacted, again, Mexico to Alaska. Almost every species of sea star on the coast was impacted by sea star wasting disease, but in particular in Oregon was the sunflower sea star, which lost 99% of its population in Oregon. We thought they were going extinct.
What does the acronym SSWD stand for?
Sea star wasting disease. Yeah. And so it turns out that that was a problem for the kelp forest, because otters had been one of the major predators of urchins in Oregon's kelp forest, but they've been gone for over 140 odd years. And sunflower sea stars were one of the other major predators of urchins in the kelp forest. So when the sunflower sea stars died, all of a sudden the kelp started declining. So 3 to 5 years after the sea star wasting disease, urchin divers had to stop fishing Orford Reef because the urchins there weren't marketable anymore. So when you have no predator, the sea urchins reproduce like the broadcast spawners they are, and there's many, many more sea urchins. And when there's many sea urchins, they start to get hungry. Because normally, in a healthy reef, the urchins will just eat whatever kelp is older or falling from the canopy, falls to the seafloor. The urchins will eat that. That's enough for them. The kelp forest stays standing, urchins are fed, everybody's happy. When there's too many urchins, there's not enough kelp to go around that's falling to the seafloor, and so then they start just taking down the kelp. They'll like chew through the stipe and pull the whole kelp down to the seafloor, eat the whole thing, and they can mow down an entire forest and convert it into what's called an urchin barren. And then the urchins can go into what's called zombie mode. It's a bit more creative than the blob, I guess. And they'll basically just stop eating. They cannot eat for up to a year, and they'll just stay there. And I might be about to ruin urchins for you, but if you're eating an urchin, what you're eating is the roe, and if there's no food for the urchin's not going to put any energy into producing any roe. So no kelp means you still have urchins in the water, but there's no roe, and so they're not any good for market. That makes sense? Great. Okay, so, and then Orca forms in response to try and help the kelp forest. So we've got the anecdotal reports from the fishermen saying the kelp is declining. Orca has formed in order to try and protect the kelp forest, but before we can get started, we need to know where, how much, what's happening. How much are the kelp forests declining? Where are they declining from? We can't get going until we know what the problem is that we're tackling. So our first job was to figure all of that out. And so with the support of Senators Merkley and Wyden, Orca received NOAA funds to assess the status of Oregon's kelp forests. And in 2024, we published the status report. So if you have your phone on you, you can scan the QR code and actually read the whole status report. It's also on the Orca website. It was a lot of work went into this. We compared aerial surveys from ODF&W from 2022 to 2010, because those were the most recent ones we had. And 170 dive surveys were done and 21 drone surveys in order to help us understand Oregon's kelp forests and their current state. So we had a lot of partners to help tackle this problem. We had Reef Check, OSU, Oregon Coast Aquarium, OIMB, and ODF&W all working together. And so some of the key takeaways from the report. In 2022, there was 70% less bull kelp than in 2010. And the kelp that was remaining, like the kelp forests that were left, were less dense. So the divers were measuring how many kelps per meter squared, and they were finding it was much less in 2022 than previously. We also found that increased purple urchin densities were a key driver with this kelp loss. But it wasn't all bad news, which is important to remember. Sometimes work like this can be a bit of a downer, but it's almost never all bad news. So, a little bit more detail on each of these. So the 70% less kelp in 2022, that's coast-wide, but there were differences in each area. So the North Coast generally seemed to be losing its kelp, but Lookout lost 92% of its kelp, Cape Foulweather 44%. So that's quite a difference in how much is lost. Cape Arago had a 23% gain, which is quite exciting. Cape Blanco, a 95% loss. That's where Orford Reef is. Redfish Rocks, Rogue Reef had a 1% gain. Brookings, a 74% loss, which I'm sure some of you noticed as you go on walks along the beach. Yeah, so not a super clear geographical pattern to the gains and losses either. But it gave us a good idea of where we needed to get to work. So then, knowing where the kelp is being lost, we also wanted to know if it was in fact urchins that were playing a role in Oregon. So this is the data from Macklin Cove. So these are dive surveys. The purple line is the purple urchin population. The red line is the red urchin population. And from 2017, the urchin density was well below 1 urchin per square meter. And by 2023, it was close to 5. So it's quite a jump in the number of urchins in an area. And again, it's due to the lack of predators. They end up turning a kelp forest. So all those aerial views of the beautiful kelp forest, once the urchins have turned it into a barren underwater, it looks like this. If you need a break from everything I've been telling you, you can try and count all the urchins in the bottom photo. That's what our dive surveyors do, the volunteers, and we love them very much. We couldn't do any of it without them.
It looks like way more than 5 per square meter.
Yeah, it's an average, so every site we do like 18 transects, and so some will have way more, some will have way less, and it's all averaged together to get a better picture of what's a representation of what's going on across the whole site.
And the sea stars, they eat the urchins?
Yes, they do. They really like the small ones, it seems.
And so that sunflower sea star was almost completely gone now in Oregon. That was a big predator of the urchins.
It was, but there's good news there too. And yeah, our data didn't find, it seems like increasing ocean temperatures are not as much of a concern for Oregon's kelp because of the upwelling keeps cold water coming onto the coast. Where I was working on Vancouver Island, there's a whole stretch along the east coast of the island where the kelp's just gone. There's one forest left because the water's getting too warm. It's just, in the summer, it's like 5 degrees above their upper threshold tolerance, and they just can't deal with it.
What is their upper threshold?
It's 18 degrees Celsius. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
We all just have the same numbers.
That would certainly be convenient for me as I convert for scientific presentations versus public education. Also diving, I dive in meters because for data collection it's a lot easier to just write on your data sheet that something's so many meters deep because that's what you're going to need to analyze the data in and present it in a paper. And then
Makes sense all the way around.
So 18's the number.
18's the number.
18's the kelp number for bull kelp in British Columbia. It seems like different populations have different like giant kelp in California can survive temperatures that kills giant kelp in British Columbia. There's more work being done by other groups into those specifics.
So it's evolving?
I don't know those answers. It seems like it's adapted to its local conditions. Unclear what that means for giant kelp as a whole in its genetics. Yes?
How long can bull kelp last? How
Ooh.
long does one live?
That's an excellent question. They are mostly annual. Some of them will overwinter, but most of them will start. It's, does anyone know about fern life cycles? Okay, never mind, that's not helpful. So in the spring, they start out as little kelplings. They're like tiny little bull kelps. They're super cute. And then they'll grow up into the organism you can see from the beach and washes up over the summer. In the late summer, they start producing these patches on their blades called sori. And those sori make spores. So when the sori are ready, they'll actually fall straight out of the kelp blade. It leaves behind kind of a raggedy looking kelp blade, but it falls to the seafloor. It'll release the spores cover the seafloor. Those spores produce these microscopic filaments that are on the seafloor over the winter, and then in the spring, those filaments then reproduce and form the little kelpling again. So it's mostly an annual cycle. Some of them will last a winter.
So those 12-foot tall kelp that we were diving in, that's just one season of growth?
That's a couple months old, yeah.
That seems kind of encouraging in that it's not like old growth kelp that we have to
Yes.
regenerate and wait 20 years till we get back. If we could reseed or something and conditions change, oh yeah, they
Yeah.
grow in season.
Like I said, it's not all bad news. Yes, that is correct. You can see some pretty quick responses in bull kelp if you manage to get the conditions right.
Old growth kelp forest though?
Giant kelp will live multiple years. I don't know exactly how many. I don't think it's like on land where you have 500-year-old trees forming the spine of the forest structure. It's not like that. I don't know how long the giant kelp.
It's 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
Never gets that warm here.
Yeah, which is why you still have kelp. It's great. The next time you're shivering, remind yourself it's good for the kelp. All right, so more good news. Foul weather in 2023 had a kelp forest. So on the left is the image, the drone image of the foul weather kelp forest. And on the right, Sarah, the science lead at Orka, has colorized it. So the forest from 2023 is pink, and the green outline is the 1990 forest extent from the ODF&W airplane surveys. It's pretty comparable, which is exciting.
Yeah.
We didn't know if we still had forests like that left. So very exciting. We're not sure why 2023 had such a good extent. It's possible they had low densities of urchins there, and also that was a La Nina year in the winter, so it might have been a bit colder over the winter and stayed a bit colder and helped the kelp out. And other good news, the sunflower sea star. So there were no sightings of it reported on iNaturalist.org or seastarwasting.org from 2015 to 2018, but by 2023 there were over 50 sightings reported. There are more stars in the water, like surveys are suggesting this. The one thing, more reports does not always mean more stars. Sometimes it means that more people have been educated about the importance of reporting their sightings, so they know if they see one, they know to take a photo of it and upload it to iNaturalist or Sea Star Wasting. So this is my reminder to you. If you see a sunflower sea star, please take a photo of it and upload it to iNat. If you're not already on iNat, you should be. It's a new hobby you can sink hours of your life into. It helps you identify organisms. So if you take a photo of something in the forest and you're like, I have no idea what this mushroom is, you put it on iNat, you enter your best guess, iNat will tell you what its algorithm thinks it is, and then people on the internet will tell you when you're wrong. It's also, there are sometimes, if you go through the comments of a misid'd thing, there's some internet drama there if you want to delve into that. But yeah, it's a great site. If you report your sunflower sea stars there, we will know about them, which is good for us to know about. And I think there were over 100 sightings of sunflower sea stars documented in 2025. So very exciting. Okay, so now we know so much more about the problem in Oregon. What do we do about it? We start the Oregon Kelp Forest Initiative. So this was an Orka project funded by NOAA. Funding started in 2025, goes until 2027. And we are going to restore and preserve kelp at 6 sites along the Oregon coast. So Lookout, Kiwanda Rock, Foul Weather, South Cove, Nelly's Cove, and here in Macklin Cove. Yeah. And so we have 3 tactics that we're using at these sites: urchin removal, kelp spore enhancement, and sunflower sea star translocations. I'll go more into detail into each of those. But again, we have some partners we have to acknowledge. So NOAA Fisheries gave us the grant, very important. The FV Good News and the FV Mach 1 are the commercial divers we're currently working with to cull urchins. We have research partners at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and OIMB. Reef Check Oregon, like I mentioned, they organize all the volunteer divers who do our surveys and some of the culling for us, and then the Oregon Coast Aquarium as well. So I'm going to focus for the next part on 2025, because then I have some results to talk about instead of just our hopes and dreams. So in 2025, we worked at 3 sites, Kiwanda Rock, Nelly's Cove, and Macklin Cove. At all 3 sites, we did culling, which is smashing urchins. At Nelly's Cove and Macklin Cove, we also did spore enhancement. So remember when I was talking about the bull kelp life cycle and how there's the sori that drops out of the blade, it will release spores. So some of the thinking is maybe the kelp isn't coming back because there's not enough spores in the water, or those microscopic filaments that overwinter have died over the last couple years where there were no kelp. And so maybe if we put more spores in the water, that'll trigger more forests. And then at Nelly's Cove, we also did sea star translocations. So, urchin removals. This is again Tom with his red urchin. This happened at all 3 sites. And we had 2 types of urchin removals happening. It all happened under letters of authorization from ODF&W. So we were able to work with ODF&W to create this new way of smashing urchins. Otherwise, it doesn't really fall under a commercial license or a scientific permit. And so these allow our commercial and volunteer divers to go into our sites and crush urchins.
So what do you do with them?
We, under the conditions of the letters of authorization, we crush them in place and leave them there. The rockfish really like us. They follow you around.
Back in the water then?
They stay in the water. Divers go in the water, smash them underwater, they stay underwater. Yeah.
I remember something from a long time ago, like 7th grade science, where they were trying to do the same thing with sea stars, and they would cut them up and throw them back. If there was any portion of the disc left, it would just regrow.
Yes.
They have the same problem with urchins, or?
They smash them good.
Yes, but also no. So that's the crown of thorns sea star. It's a really well-known case from Australia where fishermen were trying to cut up the crown of thorns sea star because it was eating the Great Barrier Reef. But yes, if you have 1/5 of the central disc of a sea star left over and 1 arm, it will grow a whole new star. So that backfired terribly. With urchins, they can't regrow like that. Once you smash the test, the urchin's dead. Also, like, for your own knowledge, if you're out on the beach and want to be nice to the urchins, don't crack it. The one thing is they are broadcast spawners, and so if it is near spawning season and you smash it, you then release all those gametes into the water. And urchins will be able to sense another urchin has spawned, and that'll trigger others to spawn. So we don't cull if they're about to spawn.
How do you know when they're about to spawn?
So often, you'll just, if you think it's about time to cull, you go crack one open, you take a look at it. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, what does the fish eat in that?
Generally the gametes, same thing we do. The roe.
So these are the eggs. Roe.
Yeah. We have commercial divers and volunteer divers through Reef Check that do our culling work. Our efforts started in July and August because I don't know if you're paying attention to the news, but getting your funding from the federal government was a bit tricky for some of last year. But we got it, and we were able to start work. And that was great. And in only those 2 months into September, we culled 363,000 urchins, red and purple, from our sites, 47,000 from Kiwanda, 216,000 from Nellies, and 100,000 from McKinnon. And I know that sounds like a lot of urchins, but if you remember that slide where I joked about, do you want to count those urchins? It is a lot, but there's still quite a few down there. So that's culling. It's pretty
It would be
simple.
helpful for us to be smashing them because we might cause more problem, right? So we should tell people not to smash them if they're out there because they cause the spores and cause problems.
The thing that you can do is, I believe, under your intertidal fishing permits, the personal limit per day has now increased to 35. So if you want to start developing urchin recipes and incorporating urchins into your diet, that is an excellent way, because then it doesn't really matter what time of year, because you're taking them out of the water to eat them. It's also a little bit nicer to not just kill an animal to kill it. It's kind of necessary for this work, but I don't really want to go out and tell the masses to just murder
But you said it's
urchins.
not so good to eat.
It depends. I mean, you have to kind of open one up and take a look at it. It depends on where they are, what kind of year it's been. If they've had food, then it's fine.
I see,
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe it's just a hobby and you play.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a natural dyer in California, in Fort Bragg, who uses the spines of purple urchins to make pink dye.
Oh.
Okay, so our second line of attack is spore enhancement. So this blade here in the bin, those lighter patches, that's the sori. So for spore enhancement, we did that at Nelly's Cove and McKinnon Cove. And again, we had 2 tactics. So we had one called Archivs. I think we're changing the name to, I can't actually remember, Kelp enhancement platforms. These were originally developed at the Nature Conservancy in California and the Moss Landing Lab. We put out archives at Nelly's Cove, and here in McKinnon, we used refillable spore bags. So the archives are these platforms. These ones are PVC last year just for our trial run, but this year we're making them out of all natural materials so that if we lose one, we're not putting more plastic in the ocean. So this year our platforms are wood and all the line is manila. And
Thank you.
we're trying. Yeah.
All those little things.
Yeah. And so it's kind of exciting because it's just nice to think about all of those extra details with a project like this. So we put out 6 of these at Nelly's Cove. We had kelplings. So the previous slide here, these are the kelplings when they first went on the archive. They get spliced into the line so that holdfast can grow into the line and hold them fast. So they're pretty small. They're about 4 inches. And then here, a couple months later, it looks like they're probably a couple feet tall. So we grew 19 adult bull kelp that became reproductive in July, and we pulled them out at the end of September. So from July into September, they were just producing sori and spores and covering the seafloor with spores. We're hoping that this year we're putting ours out next week if the weather holds. And so we're hoping that putting them out earlier. We also want to get our kelplings from the ocean. Last year we found them on the beach, like walking the beach after just finding ones that had washed up. So if they come from the ocean, maybe they'll be healthier. And then we're also we're putting copper on the bottom of the manila line by the anchor to hopefully keep urchins from crawling up the line, because we didn't put it on all the archives last year, and that might have had something to do with what kelp grew and what kelp didn't. So this is a video of the archive in Nellie's. So we're going to start at the surface here with the bulbs, and then down the blades, you can see this patch where some of the sori have fallen out. There's a sori that's still in the blade. There's also a bunch of little rockfish hanging out in the kelp, which is very exciting. Here's the stipes down to the holdfast there on the platform. There's the archive platform itself. There's a kelp blade that's going to probably fall down. And then down the line,
Starfish.
yeah, to the anchor,
Oh.
a whole bunch of urchins at the bottom.
Do the urchins have any effects on the sporing and all of that, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of. That is a good question. So the other thing we did here in Macklin is we used refillable spore bags. So we had just cotton bags that we put, like that blade in the bin, that went into a bag, and then that went down a mooring line here in Macklin. And they were supposed to be designed so that you didn't have to dive on them, so you could just pull the bags up to the surface, replace the kelp in it, put it back down. We were only able to refill 2 of the 3 moorings, so we need to adjust our plan with these a little bit. But the goal is to not need divers, and then hopefully more people can put out kelp spores. So our last thing that we did last summer was the Pycnopodia translocations. So this is the underside of a sunflower sea star, and it is actively eating, actually it might be spitting out that urchin. So these went into Nellie's Cove. And why are we bothering to do this? Long term, we want to promote predator recovery for urchin control. It's great that we're able to get volunteer divers out and commercial divers out to cull urchins, but it'd be even better if we didn't have to every year. And models have suggested that the best success for sea otters is, best success for kelp involves predator reintroductions. Yeah.
Why don't you reintroduce sea otters?
That is an excellent question. Primarily, it's logistics. Reintroducing the sea otter to Oregon will take a lot of work. In order to have a successful predator reintroduction, you have to do a lot of surveys to make sure the recipient habitat will actually support the animal. Like I said, they eat 30% of their body weight a day. If you put them in a place they don't like, they're just going to move or starve to death, and neither is good. So, and there's also a lot of red tape with permits and public support and all of that work that needs to happen and should happen, but will take a while. And we need...
Is it being worked on?
Yep, the Alaca Alliance is working on that. But we wanted to get going
Now.
yesterday.
Yeah.
And the sunflower sea stars they're not marine mammals. There's fewer regulations around them. They're still in Oregon, although a much reduced population. And so it's a little bit easier to work with them right now.
Cut those and they'll turn into a million like that other one?
We're going with captive breeding instead of cutting them in half, because then we risk killing the ones we have. Yeah, the other thing too is the sunflower sea star is the predator that was keeping the urchins in check for the last 140 years since the otters have been gone. And so it seems like they were doing a good job. We should hire them back.
Yeah.
So we had 24 Pycnopodias were collected. Pycnopodias is the genus name for the sunflower sea star. So 24 were collected from the wild and held for a month at the Oregon Coast Aquarium to make sure that they'd survive if you moved them, that they were healthy, they didn't have sea star wasting. And then they were put out in cages for observation to make sure, again, that they'd survive if you took them out of a habitat and put them into another one. They only went like a mile, but we just wanted to, where they came out of the water and where they went back into the wild, that was a mile distance. But we just wanted to make sure that they wouldn't maybe they're extreme homebodies, we don't know. And we wanted to make sure they'd still eat and that whether or not they did have an impact on urchins. And so that was the research partners at Cal Poly and OIMB. And it turns out they'll keep urchins, they'll decrease the amount urchins eat on kelp for up to 12 feet in kind of a ring around the cages, which is very exciting news. So after the experiment was done, those 24 pycnos were released in Nellies and were observed for several days afterward. They were seen up to a week after their release, and no one's seen them since. But I have been seeing little urchin tests exactly like that in Nellies this week, so I choose to live in hope. But this is very exciting because it means that it seems like you can safely translocate pycnos, which we didn't know before last summer. And hopefully these stars can help control the urchin populations at Nellies, assuming that they're all hiding and didn't just immediately run for it. And now we are working on starting a captive breeding program with the Oregon Zoo, so that hopefully then we can grow the stars we put out at our restoration sites instead of having to move the ones that are presumably helping the ecosystem where they live.
How many sea urchins will they eat?
I don't know. It's a lot. Like, I think this amount of urchin tests, and they're like about this big, I think that's less than a week worth in there.
They're hungry.
Yeah, they eat a lot. So we did all this work. Did it have an effect? Honestly, we weren't expecting to see anything until this spring at the earliest, to see if maybe we had some kelp popping up in places that we hadn't had kelp before, but we didn't have to wait that long. Did anyone go for a walk in McKinnon last fall? Yeah? Did you see the kelp forest? Okay, well, it was there. So the photo on the left is a drone image of, I believe that's the north edge of McKinnon Cove in September 2023, before we did any culling or spore enhancement. And then this is September 2025. And this line is where the culling work happened. And these stars are where the spore moorings went out. And this is all kelp. It's very exciting. Thank you. We don't know for sure that it was kelp from our spores. It could have just been that removing the urchins allowed the kelp spores that were already down there to grow. More testing would involve genetic work, which we're not currently set up to do, but I want to. And then this is a tiny baby kelpling that was found in Nellies in September, which is exciting. It's a little confused because if you remember, I said kelplings normally form in the early spring and then grow up over the summer. So this was September, which is like 6 months off. But it tried, and it was there. It was very exciting. I don't think it hit the surface because I never saw it from the trail, but the fact that it was there at all, it was the first kelpling seen in Nellies since like 2019. So wow. We're very excited to see it.
There's no way your sporing didn't help that. It had to have helped that. Are you kidding me?
We're scientists. We can't say for sure unless we know for sure. But we did have, I don't actually have the video uploaded, but we did have commercial divers working in McKinnon on Tuesday and Wednesday. And I got a video from Tuesday that there are kelplings down in McKinnon where we are culling. So very exciting. Hopefully the culling did enough that you will see them this year. Fingers crossed. So, very exciting early results. Long term, what are we hoping for? Just a lot of education and getting people involved. Things like this talk. This is a reef check class. So if you are a diver or you know a diver, you can go on the Reef Check website and look at joining their kelp forest monitoring class. I just finished it. That's why I was in Nellies this week. And you can help us survey all our sites and do the culling work. And also just educating people about the kelp forests, what's going on with them, what we're doing about it. We're also thinking about jobs and mariculture. If we can create and encourage mariculture around kelp and urchins, maybe we can create a way to have more spores released in the water and urchins taken out of the water, more markets for those urchins. And then also tribal sovereignty. So this is a photo of a field day we had with the Coquel tribe last summer, where we collected some urchins and explored them as a traditional food. We made uni butter, and it was apparently thoroughly mixed reviews, but some people really liked it. And then we have a Dive into Science program last year with the Coquel. It's an opportunity for some of the tribal members to get their open water PADI certification. And then this year, we're working with the CT Clusie and the Coquel to have the advanced open water course. In order to be a reef track diver, you need your rescue course. And so we're hoping, it's potentially job training. It's a new way to interact with their traditional territory and a way for them to get hands-on on their own land. Very exciting. So, parting messages. Kelp forest support, a lot of biodiversity, as well as several coastal communities. Oregon is losing a lot of its kelp forests between urchins and climate change. It's definitely time to get to work restoring what we've lost and protecting what we still have. And in doing this work, it's also important to think about the ecological, social, and economic aspects of long-term restoration and success. So, in closing, there's this video of the kelp forest. Just gorgeous. And look at the unexpected visitor. Look at the grave. And I think there's also a seal in here. Just splashing around.
And where is that?
I don't actually know. You think about kelp, you think about the coastal community, you don't always consider that some of these big ocean-going animals are also using that habitat. But it's a lot more connected than you'd necessarily expect. So these are all of our partners and supporters in this work. Orka itself is a small team, so we have a lot of partners to be able to get anything done. And that's my talk.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes if there's more questions.
What's the status of the wasting disease?
Occasionally there's still outbreaks, but not anything like 2014 to 2016. The agent, the actual thing that caused the bacterium that was causing the disease was identified last year. It's a Vibrio. It's the same thing that causes cholera, I think. It's a bacterium, but it's still in the water. It's always been in the water. Not really clear why it caused such a massive amount of wasting after the blob. But now that we know what it is, more research is being done around it.
Are there more opportunities for kind of citizen science other than just photographing sea stars and putting them on IMAP? Are there things that would be helpful for people who have time or energy, along with like, getting dive certification and becoming one of those people? Is there anything useful that people could do?
Yeah, we're working on it. So we often table at events like Winter Waters. And so I am unofficially also the volunteer coordinator. And so through the winter, when I'm not in the field, I have a list of people who want to do things like, mostly it's tabling and raising awareness and education. I have to be honest, now that it's field season, I am not at the computer so much. I am underwater and the emails do not find me down there. So there's a little bit limited capacity in the summer, but there definitely is. Keep an eye on our website, and when we're ready for more volunteers, we'll put a thing up.
What about when the ocean continues to warm? Is there any long-term planning being done on how to make the kelp forest more robust, or if the water gets above, what was it?
65.5. Yes. So other groups, so the kelp forest decline is a global problem. It's 60% of the global kelp forests are in decline. And so other groups in other places are also working on that. The project I worked on in British Columbia, part of it was working with geneticists to study the kelp in different places to try and understand how it adapts. You know, why does the kelp in California survive temperatures that kill the kelp in BC? And so once those are more understood, then you can start thinking about, like, okay, is it possible if we grow it in warmer water when it's smaller, will it survive if we outplant it? Can we like selectively breed it like you do with a grain to, oh, it's getting drier, then we'll develop a wheat that will survive droughts better? Or do you have to like transplant kelp from a different place? The genetics will tell us more.
Yeah. I have a neighbor that was telling me that she heard somebody talking about going out into the water and gathering kelp so he could bring it back to feed his animals. Is that legal?
No idea. I'll look into it.
Is that bad?
There's some studies that like feeding cows seaweed can reduce the amount of methane they fart out. I mean, like, ideally not bull kelp out of a vanishing forest, but there's plenty of seaweeds that aren't vanishing, and there's also forests that are doing okay. It's really a case-by-case basis. Sorry, there's...
You were saying that a 70% loss around the Brookings area.
Mm-hmm.
Could that also be because of overfishing of predatory fish?
Yeah.
On your surveys, are you counting things that are predatory, like, you know, more eels?
Wolf. It's mostly wolf eels, and yes, we do count those. That one's a bit challenging depending on how far back your data goes. Like, you would be able to see the population declining, but fishing's been happening a lot longer than we've been surveying these animals, so it's a bit difficult to have a baseline. But yes, we are counting the fish.
If you're showing positive results from your initial efforts at reestablishing the kelp forests, will you have to resubmit for further financing, or will they continue that project because you're showing positive results?
You have to resubmit. Yeah, so we have several grant applications in progress for various funders to keep the work going.
Yeah, I see another question here.
Yes.
I can't get down to the sand very well. Where exactly is Macklin Cove?
Well, it's right here.
Mill Beach.
What?
Mill Beach.
Behind Fred Meyer?
Yeah, if you go down the road behind Fred Meyer Mill Beach,
yeah,
and there's some parking spaces way down low, just a
And
few.
there's a handicap spot there, and you can get a really good view of everything. They don't have a ramp.
You can
to
see the
sand.
kelp from above too if you
Yes.
go to Chetco Point.
Yes, if you go to like the Chetco Point
Mill Beach.
Park,
Which
like
is by
near
water
the,
treatment
yeah, near the water treatment plant, you can kind of go, there's like a little picnic area with a paved path, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, there's signs from Fred Meyer's you can see, and you just take Mill Beach Road.
Okay.
It kind of looks like you're going in a weird residential area.
It does look like you shouldn't be there, but
So are you all ready for the quiz?
What about mariculture? Is that, what do you need to do mariculture to get us, can somebody start that?
and follow that road right past by Mark down there.
how do you
Well,
mean?
Like, you need property, or you need a facility, or what do you need to grow mariculture?
Depends on what you're growing, but at least you need like a seawater source.
Carolyn,
and
would you be
oxygen.
willing to stay for a few minutes and answer more questions from individuals? Okay. Well, let me thank you all for attending. Don't forget to come back next month to see pictures of an African photographic journey. And the month after that, we'll hear from Dennis to talk about the archipelago?
Galapagos.
Galapagos, thank you. And so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.